and welcome to Notice Tonight, the show that decodes the region. As COVID-19 races through the world, including India, there is increasing evidence that the coronavirus is a Chinese product made in its laboratories. There is enough real and circumstantial evidence now to prove that it is made in the laboratories in China, and the discovery of the US State Department has come across a 2015 document that throws light on the fact that the coronavirus is a Chinese bioweapons program and that Beijing was weaponizing this into a potent biowarfare weapon. To discuss the possibilities, I have with me tonight three leading China experts of this country. I have Mr. Jaydev Ranade, former additional secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat. I have Dr. Srikant Kondapalli, professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University and a leading China expert. And of course, I have author and commentator and senior journalist Subir Bhaumik joining me from Kolkata. Gentlemen, welcome to Northeast Tonight. But before we begin the discussions, let us look at some of the facts that has prompted us to do this discussion tonight. First of all, viewers, we have to take note of certain facts. The US State Department has got hold of a 2015 Chinese document authored by the PLA military officers and public health experts of China. This particular document throws light on the fact that the Chinese were trying to weaponize the coronavirus into a potent bioweapon. The Chinese document has been described. The Chinese document describes the coronavirus as a bioweapon. That is a story that was first published in the Australian newspaper called The Australian a few days ago. The Brazilian president has also said that COVID-19, or for that matter the coronavirus, is a biowarfare program that China has unleashed. And the Australian newspaper said that China planned Third World War with the bioweapons. That China planned a Third World War with the bioweapons. The US probe, the American probe, also finds that the paper was written by the PLA and public health experts way back in 2015. This has now come to the public domain. Now, it has also come to light that the Chinese have been able to freeze dry microorganisms and launch attacks through aerosols. That is also one of the reports that has come to light now, that the Chinese have been able to freeze dry microorganisms and launch attacks through aerosols. That means the Chinese have been able to aerosolize the coronavirus. These Chinese documents in these Chinese papers have been verified by internationally famous digital forensic experts. Now, an exiled Chinese virologist, Dr. Li Mangyan, also says, while corroborating most of the facts that I have said, says that China plans to conquer the world. That is one of the Chinese designs. And that this particular Chinese paper that we have been talking about, the Chinese document that we have been talking about, is titled The Unnatural Origin of SARS and New Species of Man-Made Viruses as Genetic Weapons. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go straight to the discussion. Let me go to you straight in New Delhi. Mr. Jaydev Ranade, what do you think of these latest media reports that was triggered by that expose in The Australian, a leading newspaper from Australia? Do you think this is credible? Do you think it is possible?
Wasimir, you have asked me two questions, whether it's correct or whether it is possible. So let me say it is possible. The Chinese are known to have been working on biowarfare systems for quite some time. In fact, there were some major papers written on biowarfare and the need for dominance in biowarfare. What you have just cited, the 2015 document that was with the State Department, US State Department, is one of them. Even in earlier, in 2010, they had published a paper. One of their professors in the third military medical university had published a paper on dominance, the war for dominance in biological warfare. This latest paper you're talking about actually was spearheaded by Shu Tachong, who is the editor-in-chief, who was one of the leading scientists who investigated the SARS and reported to the highest leadership in China. And he was assisted by 10. There were 18 other researchers or writers. 10 of them were from the Air Force Medical University, which in 2017, Xi Jinping brought under the direct command of the Central Military Commission and renamed it the Fourth Medical University. So there is certainly a smoking gun, and as you know, many countries have been researching on biological warfare, but the point is, in China, there is much less hesitancy, or probably no hesitancy, in being concerned about the loss of human life. So that is a major factor. And the second is that they can work in great secrecy. So certainly there are a lot of unanswered questions. People have been trying to investigate it. The Chinese have been blocking all investigations, adding to the suspicion that there is something more than meets the eye.
Right. I will expand on that, Mr. Ranade. Let me go to Kolkata, from where I'm joined by Mr. Subir Bhomik, well-known writer, author and commentator. Mr. Subir Bhomik, what could be the immediate reasons why you think China did this? Because this has been going on for several years now. There is one report which says that in the 20 years ago, the then Chinese defense minister, Xi Haoxian, General Xi Haoxian, had talked about this program. They said that they need living space because China is an overpopulated country, so they need Lebensraum or living space. Therefore, the best way to reduce population is to attack the population and lead to mass casualties in their enemy states. That means this is a long-drawn Chinese plan to engage in some kind of a bio-warfare and target its enemies.
Well, Vashbir, let me at the very outset say that I'm not a China expert in the way Jaydev Ranade or Dr. Kondapalli is. I'm definitely a Myanmar and Bangladesh expert, but I have extensive exposure to China, and I know a lot of people there. Now, let me tell you something. It's already established that the virus that initially, the coronavirus was a Wuhan laboratory product. Now, it's a different thing that the Wuhan project was financed by the Americans at one point of time, $7.7 billion. But, that's all well known. I'm not getting into that. I will focus specifically on three things. Number one, and I'm pretty firm that this second COVID surge in India today, where India had largely controlled it, we have a lot of problems like, festivals, super spreaders and all that. But the 2-3 areas where the second wave actually surge came up, Delhi, Bombay are all urban clusters. This second, the double mutant is not really a tweak. It's a bit of a new virus. That's what experts are saying. And, there's all these reports that we have seen, the ones you were quoting, all points to one direction, that the Chinese may not yet start a world war because they will be stupid to do that, but they might use this as a test case. The Chinese love punishing people. They tried to punish Vietnam in 1979. They came back with a bloody nose. They tried to punish India in Ladakh, and it didn't quite work out. The Indian army fought back. And then, of course, the Chinese were very worried with India's vaccine diplomacy. The way India was being projected as the pharmacy of the world, the way Indian, vaccines are going all over. I'm not talking of many, countries which are India's friends, like Bangladesh, who chose our vaccine rather than the Chinese. Now, of course, they're forced to take Chinese vaccine after this crisis. But even Cambodia, which is a Chinese satellite, a surrogate, They took 1 million vaccines from China and they ordered 1 million from us. So with the kind of progress, that India's vaccine diplomacy was making, and the kind of bloody nose that the Chinese ended up getting in Ladakh, they would have a very, very strong reason to try something out like this. That in one stroke, they have destroyed India's complete vaccine diplomacy project. They have, brought down India to its knees. Look at what is happening today, bodies floating down the Ganges. And here there are some definite tips that have come from Taiwanese
Okay,
intelligence.
Subir, I have to, let's get a different, I'll come back to you, Subir Bhomik. Dr. Srikant Kondapalli, there are emerging reports, there are increasing reports which are appearing in the media as well as the states, like the United States, that the coronavirus is indeed a bioweapons program unleashed by China. Srikant Kondapalli, there is increasing evidence now to show that the coronavirus is a Chinese bioweapons program. My question to you, Mr. Srikant Kondapalli, do you think it could be the second wave could be an India-specific attack? Do you think it could be an India-specific attack by the Chinese? Is it possible or is it stretching it too far?
We do not have enough evidence in this regard, but the circumstantial evidence is that from 8,000 cases a day, suddenly last month it had jumped up to about 3 lakh to 4 lakhs now. This does not show why there is a sudden spike in these cases in such a large number. Number one. Number two, China does have the capability to launch bioweapons across the border, or suddenly in the US last year, they received seed samples or even packets by the name of jewels and gold and other apparel. So when they opened up, they found these are mixed with viruses that could have washed off the entire food security of the United States or any other recipient country. These are marked as made in China, and the postal offices are from China, sometimes via Taiwan, but these are traced back to the People's Republic of China. So the second aspect is that there is incriminating evidence to suggest there is a certain evil intention. Number three, the Chinese have the weapons capability, bioweapons capability. There are 53 institutes, laboratories, which are marked as part of the bioweapon research and production centers. For example, the Yan'an bacterial factory in Shanxi province, it has the capacity to produce aerosol air sprays with bacteria, with viruses, or with other agents.
Yeah.
So there are institutions like these, and also the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which has a 4th level PSL level lab, which is high security. And ironically, much of these technologies, much of these expertise came from United States, Canada, France, Australia.
Yeah.
We also had some problem some years ago when Chinese were collecting data in Nagaland, and of course they were sent back. Nevertheless, what is important is that they were collecting samples from bats in the northeast India. They had these bank in Yunnan province, which is contiguous to northeast India. So Dr. Sri Chang Li had visited Yunnan in order to collect those samples innumerable times. So there is a certain active bioweapon program that China, despite their denials and despite the October 2020 biosafety
Right.
law that they introduced,
Now,
nevertheless, there is an active
absolutely.
program.
Right. Now, Mr. Ranade, Subir Bhomik comes up with a very interesting theory. Subir Bhomik thinks that the India's vaccine diplomacy during the initial period, if you remember, in the month of January, India was sending out plane loads of vaccine vials to neighboring countries, some of them for free, like Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Cambodia, even Sri Lanka, and so on. There were dozens of countries that India had agreed to send vaccines. Do you think the Chinese were absolutely rattled at that, the India's vaccine diplomacy, and thought of doing something aggressive that could be the result of this second wave? Do you buy this kind of an theory? Because that is theory is doing the rounds now. It is a lot of people think this is a credible theory, particularly because the Chinese could not do much in the Ladakh and the Galwan Valley.
Well, Wasibir, this theory certainly is a theory. It's in currency, but scientists are not ready to really accept it because what they say is that the virus was unleashed much earlier. It was unleashed in November, December. If it was unleashed, if it escaped, that's another matter. But whatever, since then it has undergone various mutations, and unless the Chinese have released yet another virus, they are in no position to control the mutations. That is point number one. Point number two is that when we did export the vaccines, we did tout it as vaccine diplomacy, but we are also aware that our population is over 1 billion people, and the total production of vaccines in India does not match that. So at some point, we would have to step up our production, which we are doing now, in order to meet our own demands. We did not anticipate such a virulent second wave, and that is why everything had to be suspended. But I think while I'm not a scientist, I cannot comment on that, but I would like to make two additional points here, which may or may not substantiate what Sudhir Bhaumik has said. The first is that the document that you referred to, the 2015 document, it described the SARS as, and I quote, a new era of genetic weapons, which means that it is targeting certain ethnic communities. That is what their effort was. So, to an extent, it bears out that at least experimentation was on in this regard. Secondly, the Chinese are among the world leaders today in CRISPR gene editing technology, which is manipulations of genes, and they have been doing it, including ethnic research on Hans and the other Chinese minorities in order to control them. You have all heard about facial recognition, gait recognition, etc. And now they're also looking at other ways in which they can identify a person and ascertain his thinking before even he does it. So they are working on this, and
Right.
certainly that leads to two theories. One, that their work, it could have escaped from the laboratory and caused all this damage. Second, that they did do it purposely on an experimental basis to test out what happens. But whether they have reached that level of refinement that they can focus only on the Indian ethnicity is difficult,
Okay.
because we ourselves are not
Okay.
one homogeneous people. We've got different mixes in our population.
Right. I will go back to Subir Bhomik. Subir Bhomik, you have made a very interesting theory that the Chinese could have been rattled by the India's vaccine diplomacy, as you call it. My question to you is, look at Bangladesh. There were reports that the Indian vaccines, one of these two Indian companies were supposed to manufacture vaccines in Bangladesh, but due to the turn of events that did not happen. And recently, about a week ago, the Chinese ambassador had told the Bangladesh authorities suddenly, okay, well, you cannot participate in the Quad, and so on and so forth. And now suddenly you find several lakh Chinese vaccines land in Dhaka. So what do you make of all this? Do you think the Chinese is trying to, penetrate in those areas where the Indians vaccines was supposed to reach, but they are not reaching now. Is therefore, do you think that lends credence to your theory?
Yeah, that's precisely my point. Is that, Wasmir, it's not exactly a theory. I can give you at least three big news items in Global Times. One dated 29 January, one dated 17th March, and one dated 12th April, where the items strongly criticized India's so-called vaccine diplomacy, even saying it's going to fall apart very soon. Because India, according to Global Times, does not have the capacity to sustain the kind of demand that India thought it could cater to. And there was a sinister sort of point here. India does not have the capacity to all fall apart. You just wait and see, it's just a matter of time, that kind of thing. Three items in Global Times. We all know what Global Times is. It's state sponsored. So nothing gets into Global Times unless the great
Right.
Communist Party of China authorizes it. Now let me come back here. The Bangladeshis, they did not even get into trials with this Chinese vaccine. They decided to take AstraZeneca. Beximco Pharmaceuticals came and signed here. The Bangladesh is very strangely, because of some of their internal squabbles, sat on a proposal made by Bharat Biotech to produce vaccine in Bangladesh. The proposal was given in October because, and I have this on authority because Bangladesh I know, Beximco, which was taking the AstraZeneca vaccine and then trying to get a production contract, was trying to keep Bharat Biotech out because Bharat Biotech was supposed to tie up with some other Bangladeshi company. And Beximco's, boss, Salman Rahman, is a
Right.
monopolist, so he
Will-
does
will-
not
will-
like
will-
others to come in. No, just 1 minute, just a second. So
Right.
this is precisely my point, that these people, the Chinese, kept ranting about it and they kept predicting that this will all fall apart. Now, what made them so sure that this is going to fall apart? I can understand their anger, their angst, their worry about not getting the market because having, exported to the world this virus, they were definitely looking forward to vaccine diplomacy. There are any amount of stories in South China Morning Post which says that China
Absolutely.
hurriedly tried to produce
Subir, I'll come-
masks and everything else, and it all fell apart because the quality was bad. Even in Pakistan television, somebody
come
held
back
up
to
a
you.
Chinese mask and said, "Ye kacha hai."
Subir Bhomik, I'll come
No.
back. I'll have to. I'll come back to you, Mr. Subir Bhomik. I'll come back to you. Let me turn to Mr. Srikant Kondapalli. Mr. Srikant Kondapalli, there are now reports emerging that for the last more than 2 decades, the Chinese were preparing a bioweapons program. In fact, there was a recent article where 2 decades ago, the China's then Defense Minister General Qi Haoxian, he says that the long-range plan for ensuring a Chinese national renaissance. So basically, 2 decades ago, this general acknowledged and credits Deng Xiaoping for putting bioweapons ahead of all other weapon systems. They said that we need Lebensraum. The China will need living space. That they were trying to colonize. So it gives an indication as if for last 3 decades or so, the China was working on its bioweapons program to target and create mass elimination of people in so-called quote-unquote enemy countries. What do you think of this?
Before I explain that, I wanted to come back on the Bangladesh issue. China is supplying Sinovac, Sinopharma at $70 per dose, while the Indian vaccines are sold at $5 a dose, number one. Number two, China wanted to collect the clinical samples and create a genetic bank of the Bangladeshis or wherever they are selling the vaccines in order to modify the genetic framework. And this is a longer plan that China has. So Bangladesh, like Pakistan, will be part of that scheme of genetic bank creation. Thirdly, there is the production capacity that China does not have in order to supply the Bangladeshis on that count. In the bioweapons program, the Deng Xiaoping obviously is the founder of this, but in 1952, and more specifically in 1958, China received a lot of bioweapon, especially on plague, from the then Soviet Union. In the 60s and 70s, they indigenized, and
Right.
from the 80s and 90s, they have actually procured much of these technologies from the United States and other advanced countries. Number one. Number two, there is also
Right.
the laboratories that were established, and they were paying huge sums of money. Charles Lieber, the Harvard University professor, was getting $50,000. Likewise, the Canadian in Winnipeg, the Canadian laboratory on virology, there are two Chinese, uh, Chu Xiangko and her husband, who were transferring some of these to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for a bioweapon
Right.
program. Thirdly, there is also China has one brigade strength of troops in every theater commands, including in Western Theater Command in Chengdu, not far away from Assam. They have delivery systems including artillery rockets, aerial bombs, sprayers, short range ballistic or cruise missiles with biological warfare intentions. So there is an effort, there is a
Right.
preparation that
So,
is made since 1980s, and it has an offensive
absolutely,
orientation as well.
absolutely offensive weapons program. And you are talking about the scientists at Winnipeg in Canada. These two people were finally thrown out of Canada after the Canadian Royal Mounted Police found evidence of their too frequent travels between Winnipeg and Wuhan. We'll go for a short break. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Lots more to talk to these three eminent experts on China. I'll be right back after this short commercial. Welcome back, viewers. A short while ago, I had spoken to former Vice Chief of the Army Staff, Lieutenant General Arvinder Singh Lamba, on this issue. Let's listen in to the conversation. I spoke to General Lamba a short while ago. Let's listen in to the conversation. General Lamba, a few things I'd like to ask you. What do you think of new media reports that China indeed created the coronavirus as a bioweapon?
Thank you very much. Good to be back on your show. Always a pleasure. Coming to your question, whether in simple words, is this a creation of a new biowar? I think it's very clear what has happened in the last 1 week. The 2015 report somehow has found its way to the media as recently as just a few days back. This was always existing with many agencies, but I think what it was awaiting was a kind of confirmation, a kind of verification, and that has been done. I will try and allude to that because the Australian has actually asked investigators to point out if this is verifiable, and it has been said yes. So I think it's taken a lot of time to bring it to the surface. It is a new war. It's a new kind of a bio war. It's a project when you look back. And how do we really find whether it's a bio war or not? If I take you back into history, 2017 and 18, this Wuhan laboratory is known to have celebrated, now that we have studied, in reverse timelines, what all has happened in the past and is this true or not? In 2017 and 18, the Wuhan laboratory has actually celebrated identification of new virus which can be weaponized. In fact, it is not what is happening today is a consequence of this statement, but what was said in 2018 was a consequence of 2015 files in which the scientists and military men set out to explore the possibility of converting the virus or weaponizing the virus into a biowar.
Right.
Two, one more thing is very important. China has the maximum number of laboratories in the world. People have invested in science and technology, but China is known to have invested the most in biomedicine. It has the largest scale of biomedical laboratories, and not all of them are really converging into enhancing human safety and defense in healthcare. And I think these two inputs make this a very robust foundation for saying this is the beginning of a new biowar.
Now, General, do you think India should join countries like the United States, Brazil, and others in pressing for a global investigation to ascertain if China has unleashed this virus really into the world?
To my mind, it is not only obvious, but it's imperative. We have been pointing fingers at China and saying a lot of things which haven't made a dent. Even the United Nations or the World Health Organization trying to do a research and exploration into what could have happened has been put flatly out from any purposeful investigation. It hasn't worked. And if the United Nations or the WHO hasn't worked, I think there has to be, the need are twofold. One, the need for a global probe. Second, need for India definitely to join this probe. And third, there has to be a mechanism beyond the United Nations that is capable of doing this probe. And
Right.
why India must join the probe? Why India must join the probe? If one sees the spike and spread of numbers and mutation in India, it is rampant. If you compare this to a quick check against September-December analysis, when we had almost controlled the first virus, this is a different mutant. And we have all reason to believe the human tragedy that it has caused, the whole world is watching. The kind of devastation it has caused impels us to ensure.
All right, that was General A.S. Lamba, former Vice Chief of Indian Army and a very well-known defense and strategic affairs analyst. Let me turn to you, Mr. Jaidev Ranade. Mr. Jaidev Ranade, you must have heard General Lamba saying that India, now my question to him was, what should India do? Should India join the United States and other countries in demanding for a global probe, or should India join itself be part of that probe? Now, what should be Indian response according to you, Mr. Ranade?
Well, there's no doubt that India must join a probe into the origins of the virus and whether China is culpable or not. I think this is imperative, and this is not a probe that can be carried out by either the WHO or the UN. The WHO, in any case, is being manipulated by the Chinese. There are enough instances where we see that the Chinese have controlled even the investigators, the inspectors from the WHO who came there and selected the people who are coming, people who are already compromised. So it has to be an independent body. The US and other countries and India together can bring the muscle necessary to carry out a probe like this. May I just add another point here, which is that there is enough circumstantial evidence to point to China's culpability. The manner in which the Chinese delayed acknowledging that there is such a virus around and which is spreading through human-to-human contact, the fact that they made this disclosure to the WHO only in January, February, whereas the Taiwanese had brought it to their notice in December, the fact that they did not ban flights in and out of Wuhan, which is the most connected city in China. The maximum number of air flights in and out of China are from Wuhan. Then they cleaned up the laboratories. They cleaned up 3 particular laboratories in Wuhan, the records, the test sites, everything, and brought in a PLA Major General to run the laboratory. These things certainly point to China's culpability in this particular instance. But as I mentioned earlier, China has a very competent base for doing genetic manipulation and research, for doing biowarfare. They've been working on it for a long time. And this particular point may interest you, Wasibir, and your listeners, particularly in the Northeast, that PLA websites, PLA maintained websites, I have noticed there some posts over the years which have pointed to the attractiveness of the Northeast and particularly Arunachal Pradesh pointing to its arable land, very fertile land, abundance of water, and sparse population. You referred to Lebensraum, that is exactly what they are planning or at least eyeing there.
So that's a very significant point which Mr. Ranade is making. I'll ask the opinion, I'll seek the opinions of both Subir Bhaumik and Mr. Dr. Srikant Kondapalli. First, I'm coming to you, Subir Bhaumik. I was asking you this question that 20 years ago, a Chinese defense minister, General C. Hoshian, he has talked about that China is an overpopulated country. It needs living space. So they were targeting the America then. They were saying that America is a country that has a lot of space. But now it's very interesting to hear that Mr. Ranade is saying the Chinese set their eyes on Arunachal Pradesh. So do you think Arunachal Pradesh is very much a part of their game plan?
Of course, Arunachal Pradesh and also other parts along the LAC. You see, there are three reasons for it. Chinese are into this business of working towards world domination, and they're exploring not only bioweapon but water weapon. You see the projects coming up on the Sangpo, which is the upper reaches of Brahmaputra. Don't forget that Tibet, which is part of China now, is home to some of the most important rivers of Asia. And the Chinese can hold all kinds of nations to blackmail, including India, including our own Northeast. But more than that, one of the important Chinese, global sort of geopolitical initiative, geoeconomic initiative is the BRI. And who is the biggest resistant? You need Bruno Macaes, the Portuguese minister who then became a big China expert. And he writes clearly in his book that without India's cooperation, BRI is not going to work. Now, India did not, join the big BRI conference in 2017. And what did the Chinese do? Doklam. So you know what? They are very uncomfortable with India, who they see is the only power. India is not a superpower in the sense America is, or even the European Union put together is, but we are a very important swing state. And whichever way we swing, the balance of power will swing that way. And the Chinese are very uncomfortable with this whole proposition because India swing towards the West now. The Quad and all that. You can see their annoyance about Quad, the way they are admonishing Bangladesh straight away. It's a different thing that Bangladesh is a Bengali nation and has hit back and telling them our foreign policy is our business. But Wasbi, give me just 2 minutes. Let me finish this. Why they are upset with India is because they wanted this, BCIM. And where was the BCIM supposed to work? The great BCIM economic corridor, which is both a transport and an economic corridor, was supposed to go through Northeast, precisely through the Steel Well Road, which comes into Arunachal. Now, the Chinese line is very clear. You guys have gone slow on BCIM. You have thwarted the BRI. And because of you, some of your other neighbors who depend on you, Bangladesh, Bhutan, they're not falling in line with the BRI scheme of things. So better try arm twisting those guys directly. But in your case, we will hit you directly. And Arunachal definitely is the next theater to watch. Mind you, I think Ranade is right. The trouble with this program is I can't hear what Ranade or Srikant is saying. But I fairly read him regularly and I perhaps know what he's going to say. After Ladakh and after this other Chinese forms of punishment, the theory of 1,000 cuts, watch out, Arunachal. We really need to be extremely careful in Arunachal. We have no scope for triumphalism.
Absolutely.
This COVID
No doubt about that.
has taught India. Yes. Okay. Sorry?
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Kondapalli, 2 to 3 decades ago, the Chinese had said that China's economic development is all about preparing for the needs of war. China's economic development is all about preparing for the needs of war. So in view of this, do you think the Chinese can actually go to any extent? In the sense that they wanted to have the string of pearls approach first, and then bullying, then skirmishes along the border, trying to grab territory, transgressions along the line of actual control. Recently, we have seen in Ladakh, in Sikkim, in Arunachal Pradesh. This is a continuous process. So, is this a multi-pronged approach by the Chinese? One, bioweapon; second, trying to grab territory, because at the end of the day, it goes back to their living space theory. They need more and more living space.
On that question, China can go to any extent because there is a certain strategy of domination, and the 19-party Congress resolution stated that they want to occupy the center stage, which basically means in regional and global orders they want to become number one. So that is quite obvious. But of course the other countries would also respond. For instance, the United States had responded with whatever we have seen during the Trump administration or Biden administration. We have also seen Indian response. We have also mobilized forces on the border. So we did not allow the Chinese to expand the territory. They have to destroy the bunkers
Absolutely,
and
yes.
others in Pankung Tso Lake and other areas from finger 5 to finger 8 and go back to Sirijap. So the others will also respond. But I wanted to make another comment here, which is relevant to the discussion. In 2018, Professor He Jiankui of the Southern University of Science and Technology in Shenzhen, he developed a gene editing technique called CRISPR Cas9, which basically genetically modified human babies were created with this technique. So what this gene editing experiment suggests is that it is possible to use this CRISPR-Cas9 to alter diseases to target entire populations. And for example, if the genome structure of the Indians is known, then it can be targeted against the whole population. So that is what this CRISPR-Cas9 experiment tells us, and that is what we need to worry about and put conditions, because China doesn't have to mobilize those 60,000 troops on the borders next time. They just have to release a few through the drones or through other shotguns, spray bottles, or even post them to various addresses, unsolicited mails that they can do. So there is actually a bigger problem with the bioweapons, and that is where we need to be concerted in our responses.
That's a very, very, very alarming situation indeed. The Chinese can go to any extent, Mr. Jaidev Ranade, the Chinese can go to any extent. They can send in the viruses or bioweapons through drones. They can post letters to various addresses. How do we really respond? How should we crack down on this nefarious Chinese designs?
The first thing is to establish whether this particular coronavirus is a biowarfare by the Chinese or not. And here, the United States has been terribly affected. Europe has been terribly affected. We have been very badly hit, and so have a number of other countries. So there is common cause to get together and conduct an investigation and find out. And I'm sure that work has already begun. Certainly in the US and Europe, they would have already started the process of trying to find out whether it was a bioterror attack or not. And there will be consequences if it is confirmed. The second is to bring these labs in China under a microscopic review. We are aware that this lab in Wuhan, from where this virus is alleged to have come out, has been funded by the Americans to a large extent. I mean, they have contributed a lot of money. The French have helped in its building and construction. Scientists from other countries have worked there, including, incidentally, the leading member or the head of the WHO inspectors who went there was also working in that lab. So he was compromised. So these labs have to be brought under very, very close supervision because it is known that they have been working on biowarfare. And as I told you, the document which you quoted of 2015 already calls this SARS development of the SARS as a new era of genetic weapons. So the Chinese intention is very clear. And as I mentioned
Absolutely.
to you, that the Chinese have no hesitation in causing the loss of human life. Look at their own track records. Almost every event
Absolutely.
there
Absolutely.
greatly forward the cultural revolution resulted in the death of 20 to 30 million people. They didn't bother about it. Tiananmen again, they never bother about mowing down students. So their concept is quite different. And let me conclude by just making one point, Wasimi. Their topmost priority is to ensure the ruling monopoly of the Chinese Communist Party. That may have changed just now with Xi Jinping wanting to take priority and stay on in power, but maintaining the ruling monopoly of the Chinese Communist Party is number one.
Right.
The second is
Right.
dominating this
Right.
region and recovering the territories it feels it has lost unfairly. That is the second. And the third is either dominating the world or partnering the US in dominating the world. So I think the Chinese intentions
Right.
are quite clear,
Right.
and they'll
Now,
use
let me,
anything to achieve those.
quite clear. Absolutely. Subir Bhomik, your final comments, 30 seconds to you, Subir Bhomik. What should be the Indian response in your view?
Well, we should avoid unnecessary provocation, like saying in Parliament that we want to take back Aksai Chin, which provoked this entire crisis in 2019. We should take concrete steps for defense, but we should also have offensive option in the rest of the region. Everything is not hunky-dory with the Chinese. Look at what's happening in Myanmar, where the protest movement is turning violent. They're attacking Chinese factories because they see the Chinese as the main prop behind the Burmese military regime. We need to get out of our defensive mindset and actually, attack in a
Okay, we have lost that line to Subir Bhomik. Final comments to you, Dr. Srikant Kondapalli. How do we proceed? How bad is the situation? What should be the Indian response in your considered view?
Absolutely. The first thing that India needs to do is respond to the increasing number of cases. We need to mobilize our population. We need to mobilize because if there is a third wave by October, the current levels of the medical staff would all be very tired and exhausted. So we need to immediately create Plan B for addressing this issue, which means that the whole of the government approach, both at the center and the state level, because health is a state subject, the states need to do more as well in this regard. So number one, we need to keep the house in order and respond quickly, effectively on this. Number two, we need to mobilize international opinion, especially the WHA, the World Health Assembly, where India was the leader, and so which controls the WHO, which has acted in a pro-China manner on the COVID-19. Incidentally, Chinese are now calling this as Indian virus or Indian triple mutant in Chinese, in the social networking sites, etc. So we did a mistake by not calling this as Chinese virus. I think there is a lesson there. We need to counter it in media and other places. We need to mobilize the multilateral institutions in asking, as the Australians did, on a comprehensive, objective investigation into the origins of the Wuhan virus.
Right, right. This is the Wuhan virus. I have started it right now, Srikant Kondapalli. This is the discussion has been today on the implications of the Wuhan virus or the Chinese virus. That's what we discussed for the last 1 hour. And there are a lot of implications now. Of course, as we have seen, there has been a lot of real and circumstantial evidence directly pointing that this coronavirus was made in China, modified as a weapon system, as a potent weapon for bio warfare. That is what it is coming to. India's response has to be robust and well calibrated, and we cannot just ignore it anymore. This is something which we all need to focus our attention in a very, very systematic manner. I thank all my panelists for participating in these engaging discussions and the viewers for watching the show. Good night and goodbye.